traders, my name is Adam Harris and I'm going to be having a look at the markets and presenting my trading plan for the week commencing Monday the 23rd of August 2021. Looking at the high impact news scheduled for this week, really what I'm going to be keeping my eye on is the Jackson Hole Symposium, which commences on kind of Thursday, plays out on Friday, and so it's not impossible to see that there might be some wild swings in the markets or potentially closing. If we're going one way for the first half of the week, we might end up closing the other way for the second half. So just keeping that in mind, I just want to be aware that probably from midday onwards or late afternoon onwards from the UK, from the second half of the week, the market is likely to become a little bit more, either a little bit more driven or just a little bit more erratic. And so I'm just going to exercise a bit more caution there. Moving on to the majors and looking at the dollar index. All right, so there's a nice little uptrend at the moment. Obviously, trends within currencies at the moment are short-lived, but for the most part, I think it's worth noting that we have broken through 93. We've got 94 kind of on the horizon. Any sort of pullbacks this week into the middle of last week's movements, into the range, the median of last week, for me might be potential buying points and looking for or expecting within. I think it's reasonable to expect and anticipate this to continue to head higher, which implies a potentially stronger US dollar. One of the things I would still take note of is that it does appear to me as though we are still within this range that we've been in on the monthly for a while. We haven't yet completely broken out of it, but I still like the potential here for this to head up towards 95 over the coming coming weeks. And so for this week, looking for any pullbacks and looking for buying opportunities up to 94. Looking at euro US dollar, so again here you can see that range just outlined. We've peaked below it at the moment, but I can see price coming back up to potentially test it for resistance, and then in line with that potentially stronger US dollar, I'd like to see it play out towards see euro dollar head down and play out towards 1.16 throughout the week. Looking at sterling, so sterling is a little bit weaker in terms of its overall feel. You can see we had a bullish candle last month. We've kind of almost eradicated most of the gains, and we are now kind of in an almost officially we are officially in a downtrend here, lower highs, lower lows on the weekly. I'd like to see this continue down to at least down to 1.35. So any kind of pullbacks into the previous highs market structures could present some good selling opportunities. Moving on to the Australian dollar against US dollar, also now big moves over the last week to the downside, sort of starting to wipe out this uptrend that we did have on the monthly and heading back down towards 0.7. So same thing here, looking for any breaks and retest of any levels, significant levels, and any pullbacks into previous market structures should present some higher probability shorting opportunities this week. Kiwi dollar against the US dollar, same thing here. Confirmed, look at that downtrend highs, lower highs going down, a series of lower highs on the weekly, breaking through this level where strong buyers were pushing back up. They're not there anymore. We've managed to push through that. We are at a weekly level we've just broken through at 68.50. And we now have a monthly downtrend of lower highs, lower lows. So this looking very appealing to me because of its general weakness across the board. So expecting more bearish opportunities there. So Kiwi dollar, US dollar looking good in terms of that. Now, dollar yen for me is just generally a stay away thing. And this weekly chart is confirming that. Bullish candle, bearish candle, bullish candle, bearish candle, indecision candle. I do think it's likely to slip its way to the upside, but overall it's just a mess. It seems to be quite happy to stay around this area. So I'm going to stay away from that unless some sort of trend appears to start, but then that would be on my watch list for next week. Dollar Swissy here showing a little bit more rejections of the highs, and also some bullish indecision candle. So higher lows here, lower highs here, just almost as though it's building up to a potential triangular breakout. And so which way that's likely to go, I think, yes, if we're likely to get a much stronger dollar, we're likely to see this head higher, but also sits much lower on my watch list in terms of opportunities. Dollar CAD now still pushing higher, heading towards 1.3 there. Yes, pullbacks might provide some good opportunities, buying opportunities to the upside, especially with a stronger US dollar. I'm just noting that rejection on Friday, and I'll just keep an eye on that, but otherwise looking for buying opportunities to the upside there, supporting the idea of a stronger US dollar. In terms of currencies of interest, I quite like the look of euro yen. Nice little downtrend established there, coming into touch with those into proximity of the 50 moving average. There might be a bit of a reaction against that, but overall I'm liking the look of any pullbacks in towards 129 and looking for shorting opportunities to continue to the downside. Then Eurasie, very nice strong trend, very big move at the moment up to 1.63, pullbacks into this looking for support and then looking for continuation to the upside. Pound Aussie, Same approach, looking for nice pullbacks into previous market structures or levels into support around 1.8840 might be good as well for supporting buying opportunities there. Aussie Swissy to the downside as well. Bit of a deeper retracement this time around and then a big move to the downside. It has almost connected with 65.50. So in this particular case, I think if I get a pullback to the upside first, then I'll be looking for shorting opportunities. On the other hand, if it does actually connect with 0.65 first, then there is the possibility of a change in trend to the upside. And in that case, I'll be looking to see if there's any strong resistance here or breaks above and retest for support if it's going to shift its way to the upside. So initially looking for pullbacks up first and then shorting opportunities down to 65. Alternatively, if it touches 65 first, then there might be a rejection of that level and a push up high and a change in trend. Finishing off with Aussie Yen, similar to Euro Yen as well, looking for that nice move to the downside, pullbacks into these previous lows to test them for resistance, as well as a nice round number, 80, anywhere in this area potentially if it overlaps with nice fib levels or daily pivots or weekly pivots, might be looking to find some extra resistance there and then looking for shorting opportunities to the downside. And that's it in terms of currencies of interest. Moving on to precious metals and commodities. Very, very, very strong rejection off these lows here in gold. Hasn't really gone anywhere for the rest of the week. Mainly the idea, the message that I'm getting from this is a lot of buyers below here, principally sort of more bullish, even though we did create a fresh low. We did break that low. We have done it. We are still on a downtrend, lower highs, lower lows, but this overall looking increasingly bullish, especially if we do finish and we can break through this patch of resistance here, which is struggling, price action failing at these levels. If we can break through that, get above, let's call it 1840, then I think we'll finish with a really strong bullish candle and we're likely at that point to see a break and a push higher back up towards 1900. But this is high risk for me because until I get that break above that, I don't necessarily think it's convinced me that it's strong enough to continue further up towards 1900. And just like it did for the last 4 days, there's nothing saying it couldn't sort of drip and fall down a bit and test 1764 again, and so on and so forth. So for me, this is particularly high risk. It's giving very much mixed signals there. Looking at silver, silver's actually shown a lot more weakness. It is back down at a monthly support level. And likewise, I think if gold manages to push high, I think it'll pull silver back out of this. So although silver does look weak, I'm more inclined to do shorting opportunities on silver on this than I am to go short on gold at this point in time, and then just keep an eye and see how gold reacts to that. Moving on to commodities, oils specifically here. Crude oils breaking through levels of support, key levels for a while that they haven't broken through for a while. That's looking good. Next big level for me on my side is $60 here. Expected to come back down. Comes back down into the 50 moving average and the other moving averages down here, as well as prior monthly support. So that makes a lot more sense to me. So therefore, any pullbacks in the early part of the week might present some nice shorting opportunities down to those key levels. Same thing with Brent, same thing, looking for pullbacks into these previous levels of resistance that also act as support. So I'm just going to mark that. No doubt that's a relatively key level there. So looking for pullbacks into this, especially, again, if they overlap with fib levels or pivot levels. We've got a downtrend on the weekly there, lower highs, lower lows, and on the monthly, the next really major level again here is also 60. So that's really what I'll be looking for this week, is shorting opportunities on those. And they look and seem and appear technically at least to be nice and clean, and hopefully that will mean that their behavior is a little bit more predictable. So now then, sort of moving on to the US global indices and looking at the US indices, starting off here with the Dow. So I had kind of pre-planned an idea this week, this previous week, of price coming back, testing this, finding support. It fell back through that into this area of resistance and managed to recover Thursday and Friday, finishing up relatively strong. But overall, it's just the kind of general failure to really break new ground. It's just not looking super strong. You can see these monthly candles starting to become a little bit more indecision in terms of not really finishing as close to the highs. In fact, the most recent version of the monthly candle is closing towards an indecision. So that's quite interesting for me. And so this is what I'll be a bit wary of this week, is looking to see if we do actually perhaps have a failure to break above this high. I mean, the markets are still strong and bullish. There's no doubt about that. But they are tripping up a lot more over the last month or so. And so I'm a little bit more wary. So I want to see if perhaps the markets actually fail to break higher, perhaps break a lower high, then break these lows. If they are, I'll be looking for shorter term opportunities just from these key levels down to these next levels of support. Not necessarily expecting a bigger move. I know it'll happen fast, and that'll be good in terms of intraday opportunities on the 5-minute, 15-minute timeframes. But looking just down to these major levels where there's no doubt in my mind there will be buy orders sitting here, and therefore would be strong reactions to the upside from those levels. So being sure to take profit as I go. Having a look at the S&P 500, same thing again. Really strong recovery here. It's actually more of a weekly correction, and so I'm leaning just that little bit more towards the market, certainly going to push higher and attempt and see how that goes, rather than the fact that it's going to fail to do that and continue to go down. No doubt at some point we are due a monthly correction. We do need to have that at some point. We can't go forever, and they are getting a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller, but it doesn't mean that that isn't still a couple of weeks away. So I'm keeping in mind that it could happen this week, or it could happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So that each week I'm going to be monitoring it to see where that risk is. But this reaction from the lows is still showing there's a lot of buyers in the market looking for any corrections to get back into the markets and push higher. Again here, for example, looking at the NASDAQ, there's a strong band of resistance in this area. And so I want to see if we can push and break through that, or if we're going to fail at that point and start to head low. And you can see it stands out a lot more on the weekly charts there. Much more likely then to potentially struggle to fail to break through that, and then suffer from exhaustion and then have a deeper correction. Looking at the Russell 2000, so this one is continually kind of fallen low. You can see the buyers stepping in at these lower levels, pushing a price back up, but we are still getting those lower highs. And so we've now come back into this kind of point of equilibrium, and therefore this week it is possible that if price breaks this high, we start to go back into an uptrend, and therefore the market has a consolidation and it's keen to carry on and head up towards 2400. Alternatively, if we just fall through these levels, then I'm going to start to look for shorting opportunities to head a little bit lower. So that's really what I need to see from the Russell 2000 at the same time. But then, kind of moving away from the US and looking here at the UK, heading east, the market is still continuing to push a little bit higher on these that have not historically been as strong as the US markets, but then certainly not weaker at the moment. Signs of exhaustion coming in on the top of the monthly candles. And so there is a bit of a battle being fought here to push higher. It's not a super easy run. It's not necessarily the path of least resistance at this point, or at least there is more resistance than there has been for a while. DAX, again, look at the kind of clean moves to the upside, series of sort of candles, whereas since this point here in sort of beginning of May, most of them have been largely occupying, each subsequent candle occupies a larger portion of the previous candle's range. And so you can see a large part of it going sideways. Even here, we managed to break high and then we come right back down immediately. So again, it's coming back down to test this level of resistance for support, not showing that ability to go much further, and that monthly starting to show that kind of failure towards the high. So maybe even this week, some possible shorting opportunities if we break these lows, if it starts to happen. And that can often even kick off on a Monday. So we'll see if we just get an immediate failure. Even though we've had a bullish recovery, and if we get an immediate failure, then that might be something of interest down to these levels. But certainly just being aware of that weekly correction happening here on the Euro stocks. Look at Nikkei out of Japan. This one beautifully coming back up, testing that prior level of support as resistance and breaking to new lows, still heading down. So again, clues here that maybe it's not necessarily all bull market across the board. And finishing off on the Australian ASX 200, this one coming back down to these previous highs. Also a bit of a failure on Friday to push and getting pushed and closing down lower, also still doing part of its weekly correction. So just kind of taking all of that into account, I'm prepared for the market to actually attempt to go both ways, to attempt to push higher, then fail, then potentially go lower. But also this week might see the start of a deeper correction as possible. And again, it never really happens overnight. We do see it happen very slowly here. In this case, if this is the beginning of a bigger correction, we'll be able to look back in a few months and see that it took several weeks for the market to even start to stumble. It just started stumbling back here, and then it managed to push on and correct, and so on and so forth. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, now moving on to the stocks of interest, starting off with American Express. So this one, I've been talking about it kind of doing a bigger correction. At this point, we now have that confirmed swing high. And so now the idea of it potentially heading down towards 140, even down towards these previous highs, even as far as potentially 120 is of course a possibility. We'll start to break these lows if that's going to be the case. But also there might be pullbacks back up into these areas of resistance in the early part of the week, providing some shorter term shorting opportunities for intraday trading. ARC Innovation as well. This one, although I'm quite keen on this being a potential buy opportunity, we've got an inside candle over here and another inside sort of currently indecision candle. So no clear range. You can see on the weekly, not really offering much clarity there. And so therefore, yes, there's a possibility it's going to fail and continue to break these lows and start heading low. So that's what I'll be looking for, is break of the previous weekly lows, potentially bringing price back down to that. If it fails to do that and it holds, if it's inherently strong, it should potentially be able to hold and stay towards the top end of that range. These highlighted in sort of amber and red. Looking to see these start to fail. So here, again, we've got a weekly swing high. It's actually a lower weekly swing high. I think this is going to be targeting these levels of support around that 272 area potentially this week. If we break the low of last week's candle almost immediately, then it makes sense it's going to start to head lower down to those. But certainly signs of just struggling a little bit more than it has in the past. BP not having recovered much from what we spoke about in my last few weekly analysis videos. We've got a lower high confirmed on the weekly now. Again, we break the low of last week. Makes sense that it's going to start to target 22.36. Let's look at Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola overall still looking relatively nice and healthy. And actually here you can see there's some strong resistance at that sort of 57.30 level, 57.20, I think 57.30. And so it's struggling to get past that. Actually starting to break these lows, would just have it come back down to these levels of support. Inherently, this is not in as much danger as something, say, for example, as BP. If it's, even a bigger correction here is still probably going to bring it down towards the old highs rather than much further than that. ExxonMobil will be very similar to BP. Still got a little bit further to go. It's in a confirmed downtrend on that weekly. And so again, pullbacks into say 54 might provide some intraday or even swing trading opportunities to the downside if other factors, if the other indices, for example, the US indices continue to look bearish. General Motors, look at that exhaustion coming in on these highs on the monthly, and now we finally let off some of that steam. This is really good. This is actually a good, potentially, and again, this is not financial advice, but when I look at this, and if I was considering adding General Motors to my portfolio, then I see this as the start of a potential buying opportunity. I'd like to see price come down towards 40, but I like the fact that you can see that exhaustion come in here, and now when it does this, it's letting off that steam. And then, I always see those nice little bits of panic on blue chips or larger kind of market cap stocks as being potential buy opportunities. And that's sort of the approach that I would kind of take there. But yeah, again, not looking super strong. Possibly General Motors is going to hit a little bit low. So JP Morgan, this one actually inherently pretty strong. There's a nice strong level of support. Let's put this on the weekly chart, sitting at these levels over here. I'll just mark that. So if we do fall down and break through this, again, if we see more of that this week, then, or if we just fail to go much higher, and this time next week, I look at it, fail to go higher, then again, we've still got that longer term correction on the table. Beautiful. Morgan Stanley, whatever they're doing, they are doing the right thing. It's looking very, very nice. Beautiful cyclicity here. A nice little pullback into the previous highs. Nice potential buying opportunity there. Overall, yes, definitely in need of a much deeper correction down towards 80, even as far as 60 possibilities. So this week I'll be looking for a break of the low of this and then expecting price to bring it down towards 90 if that's the case. But overall, this is a sign of inherent strength, underlying strength at any rate. NVIDIA graphics cards, okay, very strong finish, really good. The question now is it capable of breaking to new highs? But that's a really big recovery, very strong, very bullish engulfing candle, and so that's a sign of strength and definitely appeal in terms of ownership. A lot of people obviously looking for buys on that and that. So that looking pretty good at this point in time. I'm going to leave this one out and see how next week's candle shows up. If it's an indecision candle and it fails to go any higher. PayPal. Okay, so we've got that second rejection of those highs back there, back down into these lows. Now what I'm going to be looking for is a break of these lows. So if I do get a break of these most recent lows, that of course is going to signal a deeper correction. And although it is struggling at this level here at, let's call it 310, it's quite strong in terms of all the other aspects of it. All right, so it had a strong rejection and worked its way back up and was another rejection. So there's obviously not enough buyers above that level, but I want to see if it can manage to hold or another indecision candle. And so this for me would be how much further does it head down over the next week, but certainly showing that it could have that potential. Alternatively, we just immediately break to the high, takes another run at that level, then there's a different story. Then it's starting to show a build-up, a potential breakout over a much longer period of time, which might be over another 2 or 3 months or 4 months on that one, which can happen again. That happens over December, January, February. Early next year, we get a nice breakout to the upside. So it might just consolidate. We'll see how that goes. This is not looking as inherently weak as some of the others. So we've got Royal Mail. This one having had a very nice correction coming back down. I'd like to see it connect with the moving averages or come into these lower highs here, closer towards 400, 410. It's coming back into these old lows here, so certainly not as strong as before, some strong exhaustion in there, but it's not looking super weak. It's coming back into an area of equilibrium, and therefore it could start to slow down and start to find a bit of a base. So the Spider Trust for me, this one, we never broke the high of this bullish candle, so it was a nice little bullish setup. Overall looking really good. That was a good buying point. We're now coming back down towards these levels of support. You can see it started to fall through that level of support and starting to fail. It's got a confirmed downtrend on the weekly. So this not looking as strong, and therefore might start to head a little bit lower back down, or even just continuing down. Let's see if it heads down, breaks that and goes down towards 100. Tesla. Okay, so Tesla's one is very mixed here. It's a beautiful pullback, really nice bullish candle here. Did we break the high of that? So let me just see what's the high of that. 69762, and this one is 700. So we did break the high. We have continued to push a little bit higher on that one. So there's a little bit more. It's like 55-45 in terms of bulls versus bears. Just that little bit more bullish. And again, here I kind of mapped out that if it did continue to produce lower highs, then that would lead ultimately to a breakout to the downside, which we didn't. From that point on, we went on and produced a new high. So this is not really a factor right now unless we fail to break that high, and then it just becomes the same idea, but over a longer period of time. And so just these monthly candles are going very mixed signals. We've got an indecision bullish candle here. We've got an indecision bearish candle here to the upside. And collectively, what it's saying is that it's like a tug of war where the bulls are winning a little bit, but just by inches rather than completely owning this. And until we get outside of this range here, where we will push back down to the downside and push back up to the from the downside back up to the upside, until we get outside of that range, there's not really going to be a conclusive answer to the longer term future for this. So for now, it just is basically screaming indecision, and I want to see how that goes. I don't see much appeal there. Vanguard, finishing off on Vanguard. Again, beautiful on the monthly. Starting to get smaller candles, more indecision candles as well. And again, a little bit of a correction to the downside. This one is looking like it very much does want to see if it can push a little bit higher and continue to go. But it's starting to slow down a little. Actually, of the others that I've looked at in the last few minutes that look similar to this, this one looks stronger than most of them. So this one I'm leaning towards is trying to push a little bit higher in the early part of the week. Okay. Moving on to Treasuries, looking at the 10-year T-note. Okay, so now what I'm looking for is that if subsequently we are in line for a correction, a deeper correction, or stocks are starting to weaken, sort of lose their shine, lose their appeal, then it makes sense to me that we'll potentially start to head a little bit lower this week. So that means it would be a failure of this bullish candle. We'd be climbing higher on Treasuries, I beg your pardon, heading lower on equities, starting to climb a little bit higher on Treasuries. And so what are we looking for here? Actually is a push a little bit higher. Although there's been some failure in recent weeks, I'd like to see us ignore that and push and close with a solid candle to the upside if that's the case, even here on the daily. This currently implies that there isn't really a market for this, and therefore there is still faith in equities, that equities will push higher. So that's what I want to see. I want to see if we do disregard that and it closes a lot higher, then that ties in with the weakness we're seeing in the other areas. But at the same time, if it does continue to break these lows, that then implies that there's still a bit of faith in the equities market. Okay, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just that it has often inversely correlated in the past. Let's look at the Euro bubble. This one again also just very, very choppy, but also trying to push a little bit higher. And again, it's got these previous highs here. If we can break to that 135.64, continue up to 136, that supports that idea. The Eurobond as well, having pullback, found support off the middle of the previous week's median and starting to push higher back into these old highs. So again, certainly looking more bullish than bearish, and hinting that, yeah, there's that possibility. Now, finishing off on cryptos. So we've had a really good follow through on cryptos back up to 50,000. Doesn't mean that it is necessarily bulletproof and that it's just going to go back up to the old highs. It might be similar to gold, where it starts to trend up, finds some resistance, pulls back a bit, and then works its way over the next 6 months kind of back up. But at the same time, yes, it's very much something that's been kind of mapped out here as this idea of this kind of coming back, testing support, looking for buying opportunities. So what I'll be looking for this week, if that is the case, and there isn't just kind of panic across the board, is a potential break above 50,000 and a retest of that, looking for buying opportunities back up towards 60,000 if it can get over that line. Alternatively, if it attempts and fails, closes as a solid rejection, but might be finding its way back down towards sort of 45,500, 45,600. Into that area. So overall, it's looking really nice and bullish. In principle, there's quite a bit of health over here, but yes, it doesn't necessarily have to continue in a perfect trend. It could find itself ranging for a bit, consolidating for a bit, or continuing on. So I am prepared for that, but I do like a break above 50,000 and a retest of support. Let's just go through the rest of these. Overall, these still looking more bearish than bullish. It's really nice to see Neos has turned a corner there. Nice little swing low on the monthly, looking good. Let's go to Ethereum. Ethereum, really strong recovery from that, pushing back on, very keen to keep going to those old highs, so we'll see how that goes. The markets, they might become a little bit more cautious as they approach the old highs, but look how quickly Cardano has recovered from that series of kind of buyers coming in here and pushed and immediately broke into new highs. So it kind of again implies that maybe this is going to be an area where maybe instead of going to treasuries, which historically has been the thing when the kind of equities have started to take hits, maybe it's going to start moving across into cryptos. And the markets are smart enough to determine if that's where they want to go. So it'd be very interesting historically to see if that is something that happens, because that expands all the options going forwards into our future, meaning that instead of seeing stuff go across to maybe the faith in government stability isn't there anymore, and therefore it's, we're kind of starting to deviate or diverge away from that, and we start to see money starting to see cryptos as a safe haven, which I understand is a revolutionary idea potentially. To see them as a safe haven is the revolutionary idea, or maybe, but that I'm just interested to see if that's how the markets are going to start to view them. So if we certainly start to see a little bit of a climb in treasuries, we start to see equities decline, and we see cryptos climb, the implication, I think it's fair to say the implication is that cryptos may start to be seen as an alternative investment. And that is fascinating to me. Okay, and that's it, ladies and gents. Thank you very much. I'd be very interested in any comments or feedback that you have. Please put it into the comment section, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Have a fantastic week trading. Obviously, be careful and cautious out there. Manage your risk appropriately. Don't be emotional about it. Let's not jump the gun. And let's just see how the markets go over the next week. Thank you very much.